It started with a tremor, barely noticeable at first, just a subtle vibration underfoot, like the earth was clearing its throat. In Tel Aviv, commuters paused mid-step, glancing at one another with that shared look of unease. In Haifa, coffee cups rattled on cafe tables. And in the Negev desert, sensors buried deep beneath the sand began blinking red. Within minutes, the tremor escalated into a full-blown quake, sending shockwaves across the Mediterranean basin. But what followed was not just seismic, it was biblical. Off the coast of Israel, the sea pulled back unnaturally, exposing the ocean floor like a peeled wound. Fishermen screamed warnings into radios. Tourists on the beach stared in awe, unaware of the danger. Then, with a roar that split the sky, the water returned. Not as waves, but as a wall. A tsunami, born from tectonic fury and geopolitical tension, slammed into the Israeli coastline with devastating force. Buildings crumbled, cars floated like toys, sirens wailed, but the water drowned them out. Simultaneously, reports began flooding in from the north. Iran, in a move that stunned the international community, had launched a precision strike on Israel's largest dam, the Degania Dam near the Sea of Galilee. Satellite images confirmed the breach. Water surged through the Jordan Valley, swallowing towns and farmland. The timing was no coincidence. It was a coordinated assault, nature and nation, striking in tandem. In Jerusalem, emergency command centers lit up. Prime ministerial aides scrambled to reach foreign allies. The IDF mobilized, but the damage was already done. Israel was under siege, not just from missiles or politics, but from the very elements it had long tried to tame. And as the floodwaters rose, so did the question. Was this the beginning of something far worse? The floodwaters didn't just carve through land, they carved through lives. In Tiberias, families clung to rooftops, waving towels and flashlights as helicopters hovered overhead. The Sea of Galilee, once a tranquil basin of history and faith, had become a raging torrent. Roads vanished beneath the surge. Power grids collapsed. Hospitals overflowed with the injured, the soaked, the shell-shocked. And amid the chaos, whispers spread. This wasn't just a natural disaster. It was a message. Iran's strike on the Degania Dam was surgical. Military analysts noted the precision, the timing, the eerie silence that followed. No declaration of war, no televised speech, just impact. And as Israel scrambled to respond, the geopolitical chessboard lit up. Washington condemned the attack. Moscow remained silent. Tehran, through unofficial channels, hinted at retaliation for years of covert operations and sabotage. But the real war wasn't in press releases. It was in the mud and water swallowing the land. In the West Bank, tensions flared. Rumors of sabotage, betrayal, and foreign interference ignited protests. Some blamed Mossad for missing the signs. Others blamed the government for underestimating Iran's reach. But most just wanted answers. How did this happen? Why now? And what came next? Meanwhile, rescue teams worked around the clock. Boats navigated flooded streets. Drones scanned for survivors. Volunteers formed human chains to pull children from submerged cars. The unity was palpable, but so was the fear. Every hour brought new reports. Another town underwater, another bridge gone, another life lost. And in the heart of Jerusalem, beneath the ancient stones and modern steel, a war room buzzed. Maps, screens, voices, everything pointed to escalation. Israel had been hit hard, but it was still standing. And as the waters receded, resolve began to rise. The world watched in stunned silence. News outlets scrambled to verify footage pouring in from Israel. Streets turned to rivers, neighborhoods erased, families displaced. Social media lit up with hashtags. Hashtag Israel floods, hashtag Iran strike, hashtag tsunami terror. But behind the headlines, a deeper story unfolded. This wasn't just a disaster, it was a reckoning. In Tehran, state media framed the strike as a defensive maneuver, a response to years of provocation. Analysts debated whether the dam attack was symbolic or strategic. But for Israelis, symbolism didn't matter. The Degania breach had unleashed a fury that no speech could justify. Thousands were homeless, crops were ruined, infrastructure, decades in the making, lay in ruins. And amid the rubble, a new kind of fear took root, not of war, but of vulnerability. For years, Israel had invested in defense, Iron Dome, cyber shields, intelligence networks. But none of those could stop water. None could predict a tsunami, and none could undo the damage once nature and man conspired. The illusion of control had shattered, and in its place, a sobering truth emerged. Even the most fortified nations bleed when the earth shifts and enemies strike. In the aftermath, stories of heroism surfaced. A teenage girl in Ashdod rescued 3 children from a submerged bus. A retired engineer ensafed rerouted floodwaters using makeshift barriers. A nurse in Acre performed CPR on a drowning infant for 12 minutes until help arrived. These weren't soldiers. They were citizens, ordinary people rising in extraordinary times. And yet, beneath the resilience, grief lingered. Funerals were held in flooded synagogues. Families searched for missing loved ones. The air smelled of salt and sorrow. And as the sun set over a battered land, one question echoed through the silence. How do you rebuild when the ground itself has betrayed you? The diplomatic fallout was immediate. Israel's ambassador to the United Nations stood before a tense assembly, voice trembling but firm. This was not a natural disaster, he declared. This was an act of war. The room buzzed with murmurs. Delegates exchanged glances. Some nodded. Others looked away, but the message was clear. The line between nature and aggression had blurred, and the consequences were global. Back in Israel, the military response was swift but measured. Fighter jets roared across the sky, not in retaliation, but in reconnaissance. The IDF's elite engineering corps began rebuilding levees, reinforcing dams, and restoring communication lines. Aid poured in from allies, medical teams from Germany, water purification units from Canada, satellite support from the US. But even with help, the scars ran deep. In the north, the Galilee region resembled a war zone. Fields were drowned, livestock lost, entire communities displaced. And yet, amid the devastation, stories of resilience multiplied. A kibbutz near Kfar Taver transformed its dining hall into a shelter. Local chefs cooked with salvaged ingredients, feeding hundreds daily. Teachers held classes in tents, using salvaged books and whiteboards. Life, though battered, pressed forward. Meanwhile, in Iran, silence persisted. No official statement. No apology. Just a chilling absence of remorse. Intelligence reports hinted at internal power struggles, rogue factions, and strategic miscalculations. But for Israelis, the motive mattered less than the impact. Their land had been struck. Their people had suffered. And their future now hinged on how they responded, not just militarily, but morally. As night fell, candles flickered in windows across the country. A quiet vigil for the lost. A symbol of unity. And in that glow, a promise formed, not of vengeance, but of vigilance. Israel would rebuild. Stronger, smarter, and with eyes wide open to the storms ahead. Weeks passed. The floodwaters receded, but the scars remained etched into the land and the people. In the quiet town of Beit Shean, children returned to school, their classrooms now portable trailers. In Tel Aviv, construction crews worked day and night to restore the battered coastline. And in Jerusalem, beneath the golden dome and ancient stones, prayers grew louder, more urgent. The nation was healing, but it was changed. The Degania Dam, once a symbol of Israeli ingenuity, now stood as a monument to fragility. Engineers debated whether to rebuild or redesign. Politicians argued over accountability. But for the citizens, the dam was no longer just infrastructure. It was a reminder that even the strongest walls can fall, and that survival depends not on stone, but on spirit. Internationally, the ripple effects continued. Sanctions against Iran intensified. Diplomatic channels buzzed with urgency. The UN proposed emergency protocols for water-based warfare, a concept once relegated to fiction. And in think tanks from Washington to Brussels, strategists redefined what modern conflict looked like. Missiles were no longer the only threat. Nature, when weaponized, could be just as devastating. Yet amid the global tension, a quiet resilience bloomed in Israel. Artists painted murals on flood-damaged walls. Musicians held benefit concerts in open fields. Survivors shared their stories, not of loss, but of endurance. And slowly the narrative shifted, from tragedy to tenacity, from destruction to determination. As the sun rose over the Sea of Galilee, its waters calm once more, a new chapter began, one not written in fear, but in resolve. Israel had been hit hard, but it had not broken. And in the silence that followed the storm, a promise echoed across the land. Never again unprepared, never again unaware, and never again alone.